Hi everyone, this is our channel, Meet the Real Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
He was a dream, the future, or so I thought. But my love was cursed right from the start. Sounds a bit confusing, right? Let me explain. But first, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Carolyn. I was a dreamer. I dreamed of a good, warm, stable, successful life. I wanted a good job. And I wanted to travel around the world a bit with Helen. She was my best friend. We virtually shared the same dreams, and hobbies, and interests, and lifestyles. We've been friends since we were kids. People often thought that we were sisters. I did too, in fact. She even got jealous if anyone tried to get close to me. Every day, Helen and I worked a little more towards our dreams. Once, when Helen and I were traveling with some of our friends, we had a problem with the hostess on the plane. A gentleman intervened and cleverly solved our problems. His name was Danny. I liked him. A lot. I thought about him often. But whenever I talked to Helen about him, she told me that he was not as amazing as I seemed to think he was. Coincidentally, I met him again at a party of a mutual friend. We talked together till daylight. I told Helen about our encounter, and she expressed her wishes that my love story would have a happy ending. I similarly told her that I hoped she would find the love of her life someday too. Everything would be okay, we figured. Then, one day, I received a letter in our mailbox. It was in weird handwriting, as if the writer had written it with a trembling hand. I opened it curiously. It said that my love for Danny would become a curse if I didn't give him up and get him out of my life. What nonsense, I thought. Whose idea of a silly joke was this? I immediately called Danny and Helen to tell them about the letter. Danny laughed, but Helen was worried and suggested that I should be careful from now on. That same day, Danny had a horrible car accident, but fortunately he wasn't hurt. A detective investigating the case determined that his car brakes had been tampered with. In another incident, a car almost hit me, but it swerved away at the last minute. When I mentioned this incident to Danny, he tried to calm me down and told me to just forget about it. He gave me a beautiful bracelet as a present and proposed. We got engaged, and I couldn't have been happier. I wanted to show the bracelet to Helen, but somehow I seemed to have lost it. I couldn't find it anywhere. Anyway, when I told Helen about his proposal, she was thrilled for me. I spent days shopping for just the right wedding dress. I was so busy with preparations that I forgot all about the ominous letter. I went to the wedding hall early to make sure that everything was ready and prepared. Helen was helping me, and Danny kept calling me to make sure I was all right. Suddenly, the lights went out. I called out to Helen, worried that she might have tripped and fallen when the lights were out. When the lights came back on, Helen had fainted, and my dress had disappeared. I screamed to the ceiling, "What do you want from me? Leave me alone!" Suddenly, Danny appeared out of nowhere and asked me what had happened. I told him then and there that we must break off our engagement, otherwise the curse the letter mentioned might injure someone or cause someone to die. Then Helen came too and tried to calm me down. She told me to go to the car and that she would get our stuff and follow me. I loved Danny and wanted to marry him, but now I was seriously worried that this curse threat might actually be real. Helen came back carrying a bag and a large suitcase and told Danny not to worry, that she would drive me home and then call him to tell him that we had arrived safely. I was still crying, and Helen was trying to calm me down. When we arrived home, I noticed something strange. Helen was carrying a bag that was partially open, and I glimpsed a piece of clothing stuffed into it. It looked exactly like my dress. I opened the bag and found that it was my dress. I confronted Helen and demanded to know how my missing dress ended up in her bag. I clearly caught her red-handed, and she was unable to answer coherently. I realized at that moment that the source of the so-called curse was Helen. "Helen," I said, "how dare you do this to me? I thought we were like sisters to each other." She replied icily, with a glare that I saw for the first time. She said that she fell in love with Danny just as I did, but he chose me instead of her, and that she hated me for it. She said she won him over and got him to love her instead. Then they both tried to scare me into calling off the wedding so that she and Danny could be together. There are no words to describe how I felt at the time. I replied in a similar tone. I told her that I don't ever want to see her again. Or Danny. Neither of them mattered anymore. I never did see Helen or Danny after that day. I'm on a Caribbean island now, sipping on a cocktail. I read in the paper that Danny and Helen had announced their engagement. I'm thinking about what wedding present I should give them as a surprise. Our feelings are always hard to control. We are humans after all. Sometimes we do things we can't explain, just because we feel that way. I had a student named Daniel, a sweet and innocent child. I was prepared to do anything for him, but don't judge me just yet. First, let me tell you my story. My name is Jolene. I'm a 21-year-old math teacher at a primary school. I live with my sister and my mother. My house was next to the school where I work. I love teaching, and I like teaching the students in creative ways. They loved me, and I loved them. Daniel was a special student, though. Our story began at the start of the new year. It was the first day of school. I missed all my students over the summer break. I missed them so much that I stood by the door to welcome them back. Before I started my first lesson, Mr. Smith, the student affairs officer, knocked on the class door, with Daniel hiding behind his back. Mr. Smith greeted the class and asked them to greet Daniel, but Daniel was too shy and didn't move. So I went over to him to take him by the hand, but he pulled his hand away, which embarrassed Mr. Smith. I asked him to greet his classmates, so he went and he stood in front of the class and he said, "Hello, I am Daniel." Then he went and he sat at the very back of the class. He didn't talk much with the other kids. He didn't like to interact with anyone. Daniel always looked sad, and I thought to myself, he's only 8. What could possibly have made him that way? I tried to get close to him, but he resisted all my efforts. Sometimes he looked like he was hiding some big secret, and later on, I learned what it was. One night, when I was surfing the social media, I came across a horrible news story about a jealous husband killing his wife and another man right in front of his son. The child had been none other than my new student Daniel. Reading that sad story, I started understanding why Daniel was acting that way. I decided to try brightening his life a little. Every day, I would buy a small present and put it on his desk. At first, it had no effect, but slowly he came to love that. During break time, I would sit beside him, and we would share food together. I would get him involved in class activities. On his birthday, I arranged a surprise party with his class, his grandmother, and myself. He was so happy that day. After the party, he hugged me and he told me that he loved me. I hugged him tightly. He was not just a student to me. I treated him like he was my own son. He told me that he wanted to call me mother, and that made me so happy. After his grandmother died, he came to live with me. We faced a lot of problems together, but I followed his success in life with pride. Daniel is all grown up now. He's graduating from the Faculty of Engineering. I am so proud of what he has made of himself. I don't know where to begin. I don't want to live alone. I'm fed up. I need someone to talk to laugh with, to play with. I've been lonely since birth. My name is Bella, and I'm 10 years old. And this is my story. I lived with my parents in a nice, quiet neighborhood. My father was an engineer, and my mother was a housewife. Father used to travel a lot, but my mom always stayed home with me. Father was always busy. Whenever I asked him to play with me, he'd play with me for a while. Then he'd get a phone call and leave me by myself. Mother was always worried about me. She feared everything on the street, from friends to neighbors. My neighborhood didn't have any kids for me to play with. My parents used to fight a lot. I often saw Mother with her face colored blackish blue. Whenever I would ask her about it, she wouldn't reply. I didn't have any friends because Mother didn't want me to have any. I guess she was afraid they would hurt me. I don't know. One time, my parents were sitting together, and I asked Father why I didn't have any brothers or sisters. He told me to ask Mother, but Mother would just sit there silently, without answering. Later, there came a time when Father grabbed Mother and began beating her. I tried to pull him away from her, screaming, "Leave her alone! Let her go!" He slapped me hard, and I fell down. The last thing I heard before I lost consciousness was my mom screaming. I woke up later in the hospital to see my mom crying. She asked me if I was okay, and I nodded. When we returned home, My father wasn't there. I asked Mom where he was, but she simply said that he left on a very long business trip. I was feeling a little sad, but Mom surprised me with a doll. This was the first time that Mom had ever given me a doll. She said that doll would be like my little sister. I hugged it tightly and said to it, "Nancy, you and I are going to be the best sisters ever." Mom often left me with Nancy when she had to go out to do business. It was okay though. I felt that Nancy could understand me whenever I spoke to her. Time passed quickly. One day, Mom came home tired and went to sleep on the couch. I made a tent in my room where I collected all of my toys and played with Nancy. I was speaking to Nancy and telling her how beautiful she was and how I felt lucky to have her as a sister. Then I asked her, "Nancy, do you know why Father left us?" Miraculously, Nancy answered me, saying, "Father left you because he never really loved you to begin with." I was shocked and took 2 steps back. Then I said with a trembling voice, "Nancy, you you can speak?" Nancy answered and said, "Of course. Can't all dolls?" From that moment on, Nancy and I lived in our own private little world. We didn't let anyone know about this. It was our secret. Once, when we were sitting alone, Nancy said to me, "Bella, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" I asked. Then she said the strangest thing. "You have to leave this world because you deserve a better one." That didn't make sense. Actually, it felt more like a threat. It frightened me, and I called for Mom. When she came in, I told her what Nancy had just said to me. She replied saying, "Nonsense, Bella. Nancy is just a doll. She can't talk. Maybe you're just tired. Get some sleep." So I tried to sleep, but Nancy wouldn't let me sleep. She left me alone until midnight, then she woke me up. She put her hand over my mouth and whispered, "Please listen to me. Don't scream, okay?" she said. "I know all your fears, your father's cruelty, your loneliness, your love for me, how your love and belief in me transformed me from a toy to a sentient doll. I really love you, Bella, and I want you to be happy." Her words calmed me down, and I said, "You're right, Nancy. So what do we do then?" She explained her plan to me. "In 2 days' time, we'll run away from home to a place called Toyland, where we'll meet some great friends." Whenever Mom was busy with work, I would speak and laugh with Nancy, and whenever Mom would enter the room and ask me who I was speaking to, I would laugh and point at Nancy. I could see in Mom's eyes that she was beginning to worry about me. One day, as Nancy and I were preparing our stuff to escape, we were looking at a map we had prepared. Then, unexpectedly, Mom came into the room. She saw the map and asked me about it. I looked at Nancy, and she gestured with her eyes that I shouldn't say anything. Seeing this, Mom took Nancy and threw her into the trash can. I screamed and pleaded. That was all I remember.